Hey everybody, today we are going to be building a enclosure for Monte, one of our newest up and coming sanctuary ambassadors. That's a mouthful, but he is a Cuban Anole, and right now he's only about that big, but he will get fairly large if you know anything about Cuban Anoles. So it's not a permanent enclosure, but we wanted to give him a nice enclosure in the meantime. So we hope you guys enjoy. What's up? We're on to our second enclosure build of this sort of mini series of three. Um, this one today is going to be for a Cuban Anole. And now, right now, he's like this big, but they get up to 2 feet long. They're the largest Anole species. So this will not be big enough for him long term. But this will be sort of a growing enclosure for him. And then long term, he'll need something much larger, like 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, 4 foot tall, that is. So far we've added a drainage layer. We have not added any substrate yet, though. So we're going to start off with that. All we have here is coconut fiber. It's not going to really serve any benefit besides being substrate. So that is, I guess, there's not any particular reason why we chose that. This is what I'm trying to say. Word to the wise. If you have a mushroom allergy, would recommend baking the cocoa core before you use it. We have had this only happen twice, and we've made a fair amount of enclosures. But if you have a long-term bioactive, then sometimes mushrooms can sprout.
It is a mushroom that is safe for the rest of the build, just not safe for the allergy. And what I have noticed, in my case particularly, is that I react to the spores. So, if I catch them at just the right time, then it's before the caps will open up. They'll grow up tall one day, and then they'll open up the next day. So that day that they get tall, I can pluck them out and get rid of them before they open up and start.
The first plant we're starting with is a large red bromeliad. And what that allows us to do is create a really big focal point. Now, typically you would create sort of focal points and highs and lows with hardscape, but because this enclosure is for a smaller animal, it's going to be more plant focused. So we wanted to get a plant that had a contrasting color to the green that most of the enclosure will be with the plants. And we also wanted to get some plants with some different shades of green. And you'll see that as we build it. But this big plant is going to be the main focal point of the enclosure. And it's going to provide us with a good starting point to work from. In addition to that, something I hate about bromeliads is how those leaves in an enclosure like this are going to bend. Now, typically it's not going to cause too many problems, but it does look kind of unnatural the whole point of an enclosure is to look like it's all one piece and like sort of a jungle. And in the jungle, you don't have glass blocking the direction of the leaves. That said, over time, that plant will start to sort of fill in the enclosure naturally. It will grow in a way that is most suitable for it, and it'll sort of work out its own problems in that way. But you can sort of see already that red flower is the eye-catching point of the enclosure. And that said, smaller animals also love to sort of sit in the leaves of bromeliads typically, and that's why we wanted this. Oh, guys. This is why I don't like buying plants from big name brand stores. This right here is a pot that plant was in when it was very little. And instead of taking it out of the pot and putting it into a new pot, they just plopped the little pot into a larger pot, which typically doesn't do too much in the short term, but long term, this plant wants to grow outward, and that's going to prevent that from happening. So I'm going to attempt to do a little bit of surgery here to try to remove that pot. But we shall see. Now, as I'm working that pot out, I don't want to hurt the plant. So I want to avoid cutting any of the roots. While the plant would still survive typically in those situations, we try to avoid doing that as much as possible. But I am, on all of these plants, you'll notice I'm sort of working the dirt off of the roots anyway, and that's to prevent fertilizers from ending up in the enclosure, at least as much as possible. Now, in addition to this, we try to give it a sitting period where doesn't have any animals in it, so that way it can sort of work the fertilizer out of its system, and the animal doesn't end up licking it off of the leaves or anything like that as it sort of goes through the typical plant things of transpiration and photosynthesis. You can see there I got the pot out, and the plant ended up splitting where the little plant there ended up breaking off because that was outside of the initial pot, and it ended up creating a whole new plant. But that also allowed us to sort of separate that plant into two different sections, which ended up looking pretty good in my opinion. This little plant I just put in the front was initially going to go into a different enclosure, which is why its roots were already had the fertilizers removed. But that allowed us to fill in a lot of that foreground space. We're adding a little marbled pothos here in the front. Hopefully that will grow in well as time goes on, and it might even end up vining through the rest of the enclosure. I did decide to add some hardscape, little pieces here and there, and I'm not super happy right now, as you can probably tell from me staring at it, with the way it looks, because it feels very green. And we typically don't want it to just look all one color. Now, obviously, we still have that red in the front, but I'm trying to add other things to catch your eye or make you want to look through the enclosure rather than just for the animal. But we're adding some mosses and things like that. I'm still not completely happy with it, and later I will be adding one branch of hardscape. But I don't know. I think long term, I'm much more happy with the way it looks now. I'm recording this voiceover quite a bit later, and it's grown in beautifully. We've added a few new plants like Wandering Jew and things like that. You can see I'm trying to add other things to catch your eye. I decide against this in the end, but sort of toying with ideas, seeing what I like, seeing what I don't, and that's just part of the creative process. You want to test things out and try new things and sort of find out what works for you. In the end, it's all about the animal, but you also have to see what you enjoy, because you don't want to be staring at, just a plant. You want to stare at something that catches your interest. I think that's where we leave it for today. Okay. Well, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We will have one more at least enclosure video. We may have another big enclosure video coming up, but that one is a surprise for another day. If you like what you see, subscribe, like the video. We'll see you next time.